A billionaire offered her a game of chess. She offered him a way back to life. Welcome to Tales by Orion. Let's uncover what really happened. The hushed, almost reverent silence of the Worthington Estate's Grand Library was a world away from the vibrant, chaotic, and often heartbreakingly human realities of Clara Reyes's life. Here, amidst the towering shelves of leather-bound, unread books, the air was thick with the scent of old paper, beeswax, and a profound, almost suffocating loneliness. Clara, at 17, moved through this opulent, silent space with a quiet grace that rendered her almost invisible, a ghost in a worn, but meticulously clean, school uniform. She was here, as she often was on Saturday afternoons, waiting for her mother, Maria, the Worthingtons' head housekeeper, to finish her long, arduous shift. To pass the time, Clara would lose herself in the world of books, her young mind, sharp and inquisitive, a stark contrast to the stagnant, intellectual atmosphere of the room. She was a brilliant student, her passion for mathematics and strategic thinking a silent, fierce rebellion against the limitations of her circumstances. Her true love, her secret obsession, was the game of chess. She had learned it from her grandfather, a quiet, unassuming man who had once been a celebrated chess master in his homeland, a man whose life, like so many, had been upended by political turmoil, forcing him to trade his championship trophies for a janitor's cart in a new, and often, unwelcoming country. He had taught her the game not on a polished, ivory set, but on a worn, hand-drawn board, with bottle caps and pebbles for pieces. He had taught her not just the rules, but the soul of the game, the intricate dance of logic and intuition, the profound, almost spiritual beauty of a perfectly executed strategy. Chess, Clara, her grandfather had whispered, his voice raspy with age, his eyes, still sharp, still brilliant, fixed on the board, is not just a game. It is life itself. It is a battle of wills, a test of character, a profound, silent conversation between two minds. And sometimes, my dear, the most powerful move is not the one that is seen, but the one that is unseen. But the world, Clara had quickly learned, had little use for quiet truths or unseen talents, particularly in a young, unassuming, black girl from the city's less glamorous periphery. Her grandfather had passed away years ago, leaving her with his love for the game, his quiet, unwavering belief in her potential, and a profound, aching sense of a legacy unfulfilled. So, she pursued her passion in secret, in the quiet corners of her own mind, in the hushed, almost forgotten spaces of places like the Worthington Library, her worn, tattered chess book her only companion, her dreams of one day competing, of one day proving her worth, a quiet, fragile flame in the encroaching darkness of her reality. She was aware, of course, of Alastair Worthington, the master of this vast, lonely estate. She had seen him from a distance, a remote, formidable figure, his face etched with the lines of a private and apparently unwinnable battle. She knew of his immense wealth, his ruthless business acumen, his reputation as a man who valued numbers above all else, who saw the world not as a place of human connection, but as a vast, complex chessboard to be conquered, to be controlled. She also knew, from the hushed, sympathetic whispers of the household staff, of his personal tragedy, the loss of his only son, Leo, a brilliant, sensitive boy who had, it was said, been a chess prodigy himself, a boy whose death had transformed his father from a man of passionate, albeit ruthless, ambition, into the cold, remote, and deeply unhappy man he was today. One rainy Saturday afternoon, as Clara sat huddled in a window seat in the library, a worn chess book open in her lap, her mind lost in the intricate, beautiful logic of a grandmaster's game, the door to the library creaked open. Alastair Worthington stood in the doorway, his face a mask of weary, almost palpable grief. He had not expected to find anyone here, in this room that had once been his son's sanctuary, this room that was now a silent, painful monument to his loss. He saw the girl, the housekeeper's quiet daughter, her head bent in concentration, her dark eyes, when she looked up, startled by his presence, holding a flicker of something he hadn't seen in years, a keen, intelligent, and deeply human light. His gaze fell upon the book in her lap, at the complex, almost dizzying array of black and white squares, of kings and queens, of pawns and knights. And in that moment, a strange, almost reckless impulse, born of a profound, gnawing loneliness and a desperate, half-forgotten longing for a connection that had been so cruelly, so irrevocably severed, stirred within him. "You play, child?" he asked, his voice a hoarse, rusty whisper, the words sounding strange, unfamiliar, in the profound silence of the room. Clara, startled, could only nod, her heart pounding a nervous tattoo against her ribs. Alastair Worthington looked at her worn school uniform, at her tattered chess book, at the quiet, unassuming dignity of her posture. And he saw not just a maid's daughter, not just a quiet, unobtrusive presence in his lonely, echoing house. He saw a player, a fellow traveler in the beautiful, brutal, and often heartbreakingly complex world of the 64 squares. A game, then, he said, his voice gaining a new, almost urgent, note of purpose. Just for fun. To pass the time. He gestured towards the magnificent antique, ivory and onyx chess set that sat, pristine and untouched, on a small, inlaid table in the center of the room. A set that had once been his son's, a set that had not been touched, not been played on, since the day Leo had left. It was not a request. It was a plea. A desperate, reaching out from a man drowning in a sea of silent, unspeakable grief. A man seeking, not a victory, but a connection, a shared language, a fleeting, fragile moment of communion in the beautiful, silent, and profoundly human world of chess. And Clara, her own heart aching with a sudden, overwhelming wave of empathy for this powerful, broken man, knew that she could not, would not, refuse. The game was about to begin, and the stakes, she sensed, were far, far higher than either of them could yet comprehend. The magnificent, antique chess set, its pieces cool and heavy in Clara's hands, felt like a sacred artifact, a silent testament to a love, a loss, a profound, unspoken sorrow. She sat opposite Alastair Worthington, the vast, silent library a hushed, reverent cathedral around them. The air was thick with unspoken things, with the weight of his grief, with the quiet, unassuming power of her own, hidden genius. Worthington, a man known for his ruthless, aggressive strategies in the boardroom, played chess with a similar, almost brutal intensity. His opening moves were bold, audacious, designed to intimidate, to control the center of the board, to overwhelm his opponent with a relentless, suffocating pressure. He was a player who valued power, who sought dominance, who saw the game as a battle to be won, a territory to be conquered. Clara, however, played a different game. Her style, honed by her grandfather's quiet, strategic wisdom, was a study in patience, in subtlety, in a profound, almost intuitive understanding of the game's deeper, more resonant currents. She did not try to meet his power with power. She yielded, she retreated, she allowed him to control the center, her own pieces forming quiet, almost invisible patterns of defense, her moves a silent, elegant dance of feint and parry. She was not playing to win, not yet. She was listening to the rhythm of his game, to the unspoken language of his moves, to the raw, untamed, and deeply human emotions that lay beneath his aggressive, almost desperate facade. She saw his grief in his reckless, almost suicidal charges. She saw his loneliness in his isolated, unsupported pieces. She saw his desperate, clawing need for control and his relentless, almost frantic attempts to dominate the board. And she felt a profound, almost heartbreaking empathy for this powerful, broken man, this king who had lost his most precious, most beloved prince. The game progressed, a silent, intense battle of wills, of philosophies, of two disparate, yet strangely connected souls. Worthington, initially confident, almost dismissive of his young, unassuming opponent, found himself increasingly disoriented. His powerful attacks were met not with resistance, but with a quiet, almost maddening resilience. His most aggressive charges were deflected, his most cunning traps sidestepped, his most powerful pieces subtly, almost imperceptibly neutralized, drawn into a complex, elegant web of defensive strategy that he couldn't quite comprehend, let alone break through. He felt like a man shouting into a void, his power, his aggression, his very will absorbed, diffused, and ultimately rendered impotent. He looked at Clara, at her calm, focused face, at her dark, intelligent eyes, and he saw not a child, not a maid's daughter, but a master. A quiet, unassuming, and utterly, devastatingly brilliant master of the game he had thought his own. A slow, dawning, and deeply unsettling respect began to replace his initial arrogance. He found himself learning, watching her moves, her strategies, her profound, almost spiritual understanding of the game's intricate, beautiful, and often heartbreakingly complex soul. Then, after a long, intense, and largely silent battle, it happened. Worthington, in a moment of frustration, of a dawning, almost desperate realization of his own impending defeat, made a single, fatal miscalculation. He overextended his queen, his most powerful piece, leaving his king dangerously and ultimately, fatally exposed. Clara saw it instantly. The opening, the flaw, the final, elegant, and utterly devastating checkmate. She paused, her hand hovering over the board, her gaze meeting his. She saw the surprise, the shock, the dawning, almost comical disbelief in his eyes. And she saw something else, something deeper, a flicker of relief, of a strange, almost grateful surrender. She could win, right now, with a single, simple, and utterly ruthless move. But she didn't. Instead, she did something entirely unexpected, something that defied all the rules of the game, of logic, of strategic advantage. She withdrew her hand. She offered him a small, almost imperceptible smile. And she spoke, her voice quiet but clear, her words a gentle, almost loving balm to his raw, bruised, and deeply lonely soul. "It is a beautiful game, Mr. Worthington," she said softly. "But sometimes the most powerful move is to not make a move at all, to simply let go." Her words, so simple, so profound, so utterly at odds with the ruthless, competitive nature of the game, of his life, of his very being, landed with the force of a physical blow. He stared at her, his jaw slack, his eyes wide with a dawning, almost religious astonishment. She had not just beaten him, she had saved him. From his own aggression, from his own self-destructive grief, from the lonely, empty, and ultimately meaningless victory he had so desperately, so relentlessly pursued. In that moment, the game of chess, the polished antique board, the silent, opulent library, all of it faded into the background. There was only this quiet, unassuming, and profoundly wise young woman, this child genius who had not just seen into the heart of his game, but into the very heart of his soul. A sound escaped him, a ragged, choked sob, a sound of profound, overwhelming, and ultimately redemptive release. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking, the cold, hard, icy fortress he had built around his heart, so long a prison of his own making, finally, irrevocably, crumbling into dust. The game was over. The checkmate had been delivered, not on the board, but in the quiet, profound, and deeply human space between two disparate and now inextricably linked souls. And in his defeat, in his surrender, in the quiet, compassionate gaze of a young, unassuming black girl who had seen his pain, who had understood his sorrow, who had offered him not a victory, but a connection, Alastair Worthington, for the first time in a very long time, felt a flicker of something he had thought long dead, something that felt disturbingly and wonderfully like hope. The quiet, cleansing tears of Alastair Worthington shed in the vast, opulent solitude of his son's library, were a baptism, a washing away of years of carefully constructed composure, of ruthless emotional detachment. He wept not just for his own long-buried sorrow, but for the profound, simple, and utterly unexpected gift of human connection that this small, unassuming girl had so innocently, so bravely offered him. Clara, her own heart aching with a profound, almost overwhelming empathy, simply sat in silence, her presence a quiet, unwavering, and deeply compassionate testament to the healing power of shared sorrow. Gradually, the storm of emotion began to subside. Alistair wiped at his tear-streaked face with his silk handkerchief, feeling exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely lighter. The crushing weight that had burdened his soul for so long seemed to have eased, fractionally, as if the act of finally acknowledging his grief, of allowing himself to feel it so profoundly, had somehow, miraculously, diminished its power. He looked at Clara, truly looked at her, for the first time, not as a maid's daughter, not as an opponent, but as a savior. Her small face was etched with a solemn, almost adult, empathy, her dark, intelligent eyes filled with a deep, unnerving wisdom. "Thank you, Clara," he said, his voice hoarse, raspy, barely a whisper. "Thank you for showing me a different way to play the game." Clara offered him a small, shy smile. "It is not a different way, Mr. Worthington," she said softly. "It is just a different perspective. Sometimes the goal is not to win, but to understand, to connect, to heal." Her words, so simple, so profound, so wise beyond her years, resonated in the deepest, most forgotten corners of his soul. He had spent his life, his career, his very being in the relentless pursuit of victory, of dominance, of control. He had never once considered the possibility that true power might lie not in conquest, but in connection, not in winning, but in yielding. He looked at the chessboard, at the pieces still frozen in their final, almost checkmated positions, a stark, silent testament to her extraordinary act of compassionate, strategic genius. "You are a remarkable player, Clara," he said, his voice filled with a genuine, almost reverent awe. "A true prodigy. Your grandfather. He must have been a magnificent teacher." Clara's eyes clouded with a flicker of old, familiar sadness. "He was, sir," she replied, her voice a quiet murmur. "He was everything to me. He taught me that chess was not just a game, but a language, a way to speak, to listen, to understand, without words. And you, Clara," Alistair said, his voice gentle, "you have just spoken to me in a language I had long forgotten, a language I had, perhaps, never truly known." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the vast, silent, and suddenly, profoundly lonely library. "This room, it was my son's. Thou, he loved chess. He was a prodigy, too. He saw the beauty, the poetry, the soul of the game, just as you do. It was the first time he had spoken of his son, of his loss, to anyone in years. The words, once so painful, so impossible, now seemed to flow from him, a quiet, healing stream of memory, of love, of a sorrow finally, blessedly shared. He told her of Leo, of his brilliant mind, of his gentle heart, of his own, all-consuming, and ultimately self-destructive grief. He told her of the cold, hard, icy fortress he had built around his heart, a fortress designed to protect him from the unbearable pain of his loss, a fortress that had, in turn, imprisoned him in a world of profound, almost suffocating, loneliness. Clara listened, her own heart aching with a deep, empathetic understanding. She saw not just a powerful, broken man, but a grieving father, a man whose soul, like a forgotten, untended garden, had been left to wither and die in the harsh, unforgiving climate of his own, self-imposed emotional desert. "Mr. Worthington," she said softly, when he had finally, tearfully, fallen silent, "your son, his memory, it is not lost. It is here, in this room, in this game, in you. You have not lost him. You have just forgotten how to see him, how to hear him, how to play with him. Her words, so simple, so direct, so utterly, profoundly true, were a revelation. He had spent years trying to escape his grief, to bury it, to deny it. He had never once considered the possibility of embracing it, of transforming it, of finding a way to honor his son's memory not by retreating from the world, but by re-engaging with it, by finding a new way to share the love, the passion, the brilliant, beautiful, and ultimately life-affirming game that had once so long ago united them. He looked at Clara, at her clear, honest eyes, at the unwavering compassion in her gaze, and he knew, with a certainty that resonated in the deepest, most forgotten corners of his soul, that this child, this improbable, wise, and deeply human child genius, had not just beaten him at a game of chess. She had, in a single, profound, and utterly transformative act of compassionate, strategic genius, offered him a way back to his son, a way back to himself, a way back to life. The quiet, transformative encounter in the Worthington Library was not an ending, but a beginning. It was the catalyst for a profound and deeply surprising friendship between two disparate, yet strangely connected souls. The powerful, grieving billionaire and the quiet, unassuming, and brilliantly insightful Maid's daughter. Alastair Worthington, his heart, so long encased in the ice of his sorrow, now beginning to thaw, found himself, to his own profound astonishment, looking forward to his Saturday afternoons with a new, almost boyish eagerness. He would seek out Clara, not as a master seeking a diversion, but as a student, a humble supplicant, seeking her wisdom, her perspective, her unique and deeply healing understanding of the game that had once been his and his son's greatest passion. Their chess games became a weekly ritual, a silent, intimate conversation played out on the 64 squares of the antique, ivory, and onyx board. Alastair learned to play a new kind of game, a game that was less about conquest, about dominance, and more about connection, about understanding, about the beautiful, intricate, and often heartbreakingly complex dance of strategy and emotion, of logic and intuition, of life itself. Clara, in turn, blossomed under Alastair's mentorship. He saw in her not just a chess prodigy, but a brilliant analytical mind, a mind that possessed a profound, almost spiritual understanding of complex systems, of hidden patterns, of the very architecture of strategic thought. He began to share with her not just the intricacies of chess, but the complexities of his own vast and often ruthless corporate world. He would speak of business deals, of market fluctuations, of the intricate, high-stakes negotiations that defined his professional life, and he would watch, with a mixture of awe and a dawning, almost paternal pride, as Clara's sharp, inquisitive mind dissected the problems, identified the hidden vulnerabilities, the unseen opportunities with a clarity, a precision, that often eluded his own, highly paid, and vastly more experienced, executive team. You see, Mr. Worthington, she would explain, her voice quiet but firm, using the chess pieces to illustrate her points. This hostile takeover bid, it is like a classic king's gambit. Audacious, aggressive, but it leaves your opponent's own king dangerously exposed. You should not meet their aggression with aggression. You should decline the gambit, strengthen your own position, and wait for them to overextend, to make a single, fatal miscalculation. Her insights were not just brilliant, they were revolutionary. She saw his corporate battles not as a series of isolated, transactional encounters, but as a single, interconnected, and deeply human game, a game governed by the same principles of psychology, of strategy, of a profound and often irrational, emotional logic that governed the ancient, beautiful, and endlessly complex game of chess. Alastair, humbled and inspired by her wisdom, began to apply her insights to his own vast and often profoundly cynical business empire. He began to lead with a new, almost unheard of blend of ruthless efficiency and a deep, empathetic understanding of the human element. He began to see his employees not as assets, but as people, his competitors not as enemies, but as fellow players in a complex, ever-changing game. His very definition of winning began to evolve. It was no longer just about profit, about power, about dominance. It was about creating something of lasting value, something meaningful, something beautiful, something that honored not just the relentless, forward march of progress, but the quiet, enduring, and deeply human wisdom of the past. The changes within Thorne Industries were subtle at first, then increasingly and profoundly transformative. The company's culture, once a brutal, cutthroat, winner-take-all environment, began to soften, to shift, to embrace a new, more collaborative, more human-centric approach. Productivity, paradoxically, soared. Employee morale, once at an all-time low, reached unprecedented heights. The industry watched in bewildered astonishment as Alastair Worthington, the Arctic Fox, the ruthless titan of finance, transformed into a visionary leader, a champion of a new, more ethical, more compassionate, and ultimately, more successful form of capitalism. No one, of course, knew the secret of his transformation. No one knew of the quiet, unassuming Maid's daughter who, every Saturday afternoon, in a dusty, silent library, was his secret weapon, his Eminence Grice, his most trusted and most brilliant strategic advisor. Clara, for her part, remained her humble, unassuming self. She continued her studies, her mind now crackling with a new, exhilarating energy, her understanding of the world, of its complex, interconnected systems, deepening with each passing day. She knew that her unique and profoundly unlikely friendship with Alastair Worthington was more than just a series of chess lessons. It was a partnership, a collaboration, a quiet, powerful, and deeply meaningful alliance between two disparate yet strangely connected souls, an alliance that was not just changing their own lives, but was, in its own quiet, revolutionary way, beginning to change the very world they inhabited. The culmination of Clara Reyes's quiet, yet profound, influence on Alastair Worthington, and by extension, on the very fabric of Thorne Industries, arrived not in a dramatic, boardroom confrontation, but in a small, sunlit classroom in an underserved, inner-city neighborhood. The Leo Worthington Foundation for Strategic Thinking and Youth Empowerment, a charity Alastair had established years ago in his son's memory, had, like so much in his life, become a sterile, impersonal entity, a vehicle for tax write-offs and glossy, self-congratulatory public relations campaigns. It funded elite, private school chess programs, sponsored high-profile, exclusive tournaments. Its impact, while measurable on a spreadsheet, felt hollow, impersonal, a monument to his wealth, not to his son's true and deeply human spirit. Clara, in her quiet, unassuming way, had gently, yet persistently, begun to challenge this. She spoke to Alastair not of charity, but of investment. An investment in untapped potential, in the brilliant, often overlooked minds of children from disadvantaged backgrounds, children who, like herself, possessed a profound, innate, and often unrecognized genius, but lacked the resources, the opportunities, the simple, unwavering belief to let it flourish. Chess, Mr. Worthington, she had said, during one of their Saturday afternoon sessions, her gaze direct, unwavering, is not a game for the privileged. It is a game for everyone. It is a language that transcends class, that transcends race, that transcends circumstance. And the true masters of the game are often found not in the hallowed halls of exclusive academies, but in the quiet, forgotten corners of the world, in the hearts and minds of children who have nothing but their own fierce and beautiful intellect to guide them. Her words, as always, had struck a deep, resonant chord within Alastair. He saw the truth, the profound, simple, and utterly undeniable wisdom in her perspective. And he, a man now accustomed to acting on such truths, had immediately and decisively set about to change things. He, with Clara's guidance, completely restructured the Leo Worthington Foundation. They redirected its vast resources, shifting the focus from elite, exclusive programs to grassroots, community-based initiatives. They established after-school chess clubs in inner-city schools, funded scholarships for gifted, low-income students, and created a mentorship program that paired seasoned business leaders, including Alistair's own, initially reluctant, but now increasingly enthusiastic executives with young, aspiring, strategic thinkers from all walks of life. The event today was the final round of the first annual Leo Worthington Inter-City Chess Championship, a tournament that had drawn hundreds of children from across the city's most challenged neighborhoods. Their passion for the game, a vibrant, powerful testament to the success of the Foundation's new, more human-centric mission. The final match was being played out in a small, sunlit classroom, the air thick with a hushed, almost reverent anticipation. The two finalists, a quiet, intense young boy from a local housing project and a fierce, determined girl from a struggling immigrant family, were locked in a silent, epic battle of wits, their faces a mask of profound, almost adult, concentration, their small hands moving the pieces with a speed and a precision that was breathtaking to behold. Alistair and Clara sat in the back of the small, crowded room, quiet, almost invisible observers. Alistair watched the children at their brilliant, uninhibited, and utterly unapologetic display of strategic genius, and he felt a wave of emotion so potent it almost buckled him. He saw in their eyes the same fire, the same passion, the same profound, almost spiritual love for the game that he had once seen in his own sons. And he knew, with a certainty that resonated in the deepest, most sacred corners of his soul, that this was a legacy worthy of Leo. This was a tribute not to his loss, but to his life, to his spirit, to the beautiful, brilliant, and ultimately life-affirming game that he had so loved. He looked at Clara, sitting beside him, her own face alight with a quiet, radiant, and deeply humble pride. He saw not just the maid's daughter, not just his brilliant, unconventional protege, but a partner, a kindred spirit, a woman whose quiet wisdom, whose profound empathy, whose unwavering belief in the untapped potential of every human being had not just saved his company, not just healed his own broken heart, but had, in a very real, very tangible way, begun to change the world one small, quiet, and profoundly meaningful chess move at a time. The game on the board reached its stunning, brilliant conclusion. A checkmate. A victor. A burst of spontaneous, joyous applause from the assembled crowd of parents, of teachers, of fellow students. But Alistair Sterling saw not just a winner and a loser. He saw two brilliant young minds, two future leaders, two quiet heroes whose lives, whose futures had been irrevocably, profoundly changed by the simple, yet powerful gift of a chance. A chance to play, a chance to learn, a chance to dream, a chance to be seen, a chance that had been made possible by the quiet, unassuming, and utterly transformative genius of Clara Reyes, the girl who had not just mastered the game of chess, but had, in her own quiet, revolutionary way, begun to master the far more complex and infinitely more important game of life itself. He reached out, his hand covering hers, a silent, powerful gesture of gratitude, of partnership, of a deep, abiding, and profoundly human affection. The game was far from over. In fact, for both of them, and for the countless lives they would yet touch, it had only just begun. The success of the Leo Worthington Inter-City Chess Championship was not just a local victory. It was a global phenomenon. The story of the billionaire CEO and the quiet maid's daughter who had, together, transformed a sterile, corporate foundation into a vibrant, compassionate force for youth empowerment, captured the imagination of the world. News outlets, from prestigious financial journals to grassroots community blogs, lauded their innovative, human-centric approach to philanthropy, holding it up as a new, more hopeful model for corporate social responsibility. Alastair Worthington, once the Arctic fox, the ruthless titan of finance, now found himself a reluctant, yet surprisingly eloquent advocate for a new kind of capitalism. A capitalism with a conscience. A capitalism that measured its success not just in profits, but in purpose. He gave speeches at global economic forums, not about hostile takeovers, but about the profound, often untapped, economic potential of investing in human capital, of nurturing the brilliant, often overlooked minds of the next generation, regardless of their background, their circumstances, their zip code. He spoke of Clara, not as an employee, but as his greatest teacher, his most profound catalyst for change, his partner in a shared and deeply meaningful mission. Clara, for her part, remained largely out of the spotlight, her quiet, unassuming nature a stark and refreshing contrast to the self-aggrandizing, ego-driven world of global philanthropy. She became the true heart and soul of the Leo Worthington Foundation, her profound, intuitive understanding of human need, of systemic inequity, guiding its every decision. The foundation expanded its reach, establishing chess programs, mentorship initiatives, and scholarship funds in underserved communities around the world. Its impact tangible, transformative, a testament to the quiet, powerful ripple effect of a single, simple, and deeply human idea. The relationship between Alastair and Clara continued to evolve, to deepen, their partnership a complex, beautiful, and utterly unique blend of mentor and protege, of father and daughter, of two kindred spirits who had, through the strangest, most improbable of circumstances, found in each other a profound and deeply healing sense of home. Alastair, with Clara's gentle, unwavering encouragement, began to truly heal from the long, deep wound of his son's death. He learned to speak of Leo not with sorrow, but with joy, with a quiet, profound, and deeply grateful pride. He saw his son's legacy not in the cold, hard marble of a mausoleum, but in the bright, hopeful faces of the thousands of children the foundation now served, in the vibrant, chaotic, and beautiful energy of a new generation of dreamers, of thinkers, of quiet, brilliant, and utterly unapologetic geniuses. He even, to his own profound surprise, began to play chess again, not with the old, desperate, aggressive need to win, but with a new, quiet, almost meditative joy, a joy in the sheer, elegant beauty of the game itself. A joy he now shared not just with Clara, but with the young, aspiring grandmasters of the Leo Worthington chess clubs, their youthful enthusiasm, their unbridled passion, a constant, beautiful reminder of the son he had lost, and in a way, through them, had found again. One cool autumn evening, years after their first fateful encounter in the Worthington Library, Alastair and Clara stood on the rooftop of a newly opened community center in a once blighted, now thriving, inner-city neighborhood. A community center built, in large part, by a generous, anonymous donation from the Leo Worthington Foundation. The air was filled with the sounds of children's laughter, with the scent of a shared, communal meal, with the quiet, vibrant hum of a community in the process of healing, of rebuilding, of finding its own collective hope. They stood together in the fading light, two solitary souls who had, through the strangest, most improbable of circumstances, found in each other a family, a community, a shared and deeply beautiful sense of purpose. "Do you ever miss it, Clara?" Alastair asked suddenly, his voice a low, resonant rumble, his gaze fixed on the distant, glittering lights of the city's financial district. "Miss what, Alastair?" Clara replied, her own voice calm, steady, a quiet smile playing on her lips. "The quiet of the library," he said, a faint, almost wistful humor in his tone. "The predictable silence, the blissful anonymity." Clara was silent for a long moment, her dark, intelligent eyes reflecting the fiery colors of the sunset. "Sometimes," she admitted finally, her voice barely a whisper, "sometimes I miss the simplicity, the illusion of a life where the most pressing concern was the outcome of a single, solitary game." She paused, then turned to look at him, her gaze direct, unwavering, filled with a profound, unspoken, and utterly mutual affection. But I will not trade this, Alistair. This is a different kind of game. A quieter game. A more meaningful game. A game where everyone wins. Alistair met her gaze, his own icy blue eyes, once so cold, now filled with a new, unfamiliar warmth, a deep, abiding and profoundly human peace. Nor I, Clara, he said softly. Nor I. They stood together in the gathering dusk, two unlikely companions, their pasts a tapestry of shadows and secrets, their futures an unwritten, yet now deeply, beautifully, hopeful landscape. They had both been changed irrevocably by their encounter, by the dangerous, exhilarating, and ultimately redemptive journey they had shared. They were survivors. They were warriors. They were partners. And as the first stars began to prick the darkening velvet of the urban sky, Alistair Worthington and Clara Reyes, the billionaire and the maid's daughter, the cynic and the believer, raised their imaginary glasses in a silent, solitary toast. To second chances, to quiet revolutions, to the enduring, indomitable, and often terrifying power of the human spirit. And perhaps, just perhaps, to the faint, flickering but never entirely extinguished hope that even in the darkest, most compromised of worlds, true and lasting, change is always, always possible.